Welcome to this learning lab, spotlighting successful green team actions. We have an exciting lineup of green team leaders who will offer great action ideas and enthusiasm for you to do this important work of protecting and restoring our shared watershed. This program, this learning lab, is part of our Faithful Green Leader training. It's continuing education, but it's open to all people and all congregations to participate. Next slide. Let's join in prayer. And please remain muted while I read out loud. Creator of the universe and of this precious earth, Spirit of life that sustains us, you care for all creations with whom we share this beautiful creation. Inspire us to take action that heals our broken relationship with Earth. May these actions express our love for the intricate web of life within which we are one interdependent community. Amen, and so be it. And now can we select speaker view and make sure that we have Pastor Steve Burkow, who's going to share his story about the green team efforts there at Grace Lutheran Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where the congregation has a strong commitment to care for creation. So take it away, Pastor Steve.
Thanks, Glia. And thanks everybody for showing up tonight. Happy to be here and share some about our fairly recent project. There'll be a little video which will I'll try to make sure it's not too redundant, but it was recorded to really sum some of this up in a nutshell. But about 5 years ago, we had gone through the strategic planning process of planning a major renovation of our 1906 church building, which has a big roof, as you can see in that snowy picture there, if you're on that slide. And the side of the roof that you see is on James Street. It's on the corner of Queen and James. Am I coming through okay, Claudia?
Yes.
Okay, good. The other side of that roof comes down onto our parking lot. And on that side of the building, we undertook a major renovation, which included building an elevator and a new facade and tower out there to house the elevator. So we were digging up all of the ground contiguous to the church on the north side. Underneath the parking lot and on the other side of the parking lot, there's a little house that we bought about 15 years ago that's attached to our office, and they had a nice little backyard. So that's kind of the physical setup. Otherwise, we're more or less landlocked with concrete parking lot, sidewalks, and building. So we asked the architects to be a little bit creative in thinking through how we would present to the city our stormwater management plan. And actually the water engineer didn't get the memo. So that's one thing I want to say to you. Don't expect necessarily the professionals in the field to share your enthusiasm about what you're really willing to do and pay for unless you really communicate that clearly. We asked them to be creative. For them, that meant try to minimize our cost and do the bare minimum that the city required to mitigate the effect, which was basically we were building a roof over some previously permeable soil. So they wanted to make sure we were going to capture that runoff and not let it run into the bay. What you may not know up here is that Lancaster's city sewer system is combined with the stormwater runoff system, so that every time we have a major rainfall event that exceeds the capacity of the sewer treatment plant to treat all that water, raw sewage ends up, or at least water contaminated with that, ends up running out of the plant and right into the Conestoga River, which runs down to Chesapeake Bay through the Susquehanna. So we've all been encouraged to try to mitigate our stormwater, which contributes to that. So we went back to the engineer and said, look, we're really serious. We want to take this chance while we have all this ground torn up. We have 3 big storm leaders. As you can see, some of them are, you can see some of them in this picture of the church. Well, maybe just barely. running off that steep pitched roof down the side of the building. And those are running directly into the stormwater system. So we disconnected them, ran them through a new 8-inch PVC pipe, which then we buried under the parking lot. We dug up that whole part of the parking lot, which we were going to repave anyway. And we dug a large rock basin, which is one way of capturing a large amount of stormwater. You just dig a huge hole, fill it with big rocks, which have a lot of airspace between them, which can fill up easily with water. But then it sort of protects, it negates some of the erosion factor of the water. So when they run into that rock basin, the water can sort of stabilize and just start perking down into the water table again. And so we're mitigating, between 100 and 150,000 gallons of water a year out of the sewer system that we'd normally be flushing in every rainstorm off that north side of the roof. And that makes us happy. Additional happiness came from getting rid of invasive stuff and planting all new natural native pollinator species in our landscaping, which you really can't see in the winter wonderland shot there, but take my word for it, it's all starting to bloom very nicely now. And we actually have, we had an exciting thing happen, which I can't really show you pictures of, because this Sunday, somebody noticed a swarm of bees in the new pine tree we planted outside of the church. Now we already have 2 hives. And so we were worried that one of our queens had left the hive, but we checked our hives and both our hives were intact. And we happened to have one more hive body that was empty. So we quickly set it up and our beekeeper came in and she and I captured another whole swarm of bees in some of that landscaping and put it up on the office roof. So now we've got 3 hives going here, pretty healthy. And they're all, happy to be zooming down on all those native Pennsylvania early spring flowering plants and dandelions and things that are popping up in what ground that we do have. So that's a nutshell of what we did. We're happy about it, and we're looking into, we used our green team planning grant to engage a landscape architect to help us conceive of what we can do with this north side of the building, which really doesn't have any perkable land attached to it. It's all concrete. It's a window well and a sidewalk and a street. So we're going to have to put that into cisterns somehow and try to hold it up and then let it run out maybe at a different time. We're thinking about, nothing's off the table yet. We're thinking about a gray water plumbing system, which is expensive to install. Would have been better to have done that when we had the building torn up for a renovation. But, there's a thing called project creep, which the architects try to help you avoid. So you can end up affording what they have designed for you to do. So I'll stop there, I think, and see if you have any questions, or Chloe, if you want to play the video, take it from here.
Thank you, Pastor Steve. I just will say, if you could say a few words about your faith motivation and the community really coming together around this, and how if you had to do a lot of convincing, or there was, motivation to begin with.
Sure. There was motivation to begin with. We had deferred a project kind of like this a little bit farther down the parking lot, which runs downhill. And the architect had said, Pastor, this isn't the best bang for the buck. Let's wait till we get the other stuff figured out. So there was some of that already there. We had some eager earth stewards in the congregation. We have a creation care team that, has been putting these beehives together and gathering styrofoam and doing some of those a little bit lower impact things that you can do at whatever level people participate in. But we hadn't really budgeted $30,000 of creation care money to do a water project until we got the idea and saw how what an impact it would have. So we had one congregational meeting after church. We called an emergency meeting to add this scope of work to the project. We had a couple people speak about it, not just me, but some of our creation care team. We put together a little presentation, and we had about 80 people show up, because $30,000 is a lot of money to add. I mean, it was a $2.4 million project. So every penny counts, But we had one lead donor that was inspired at that meeting to offer. I hadn't been able to check with her in advance, but she said, my husband and I will pledge $10,000, the first 10,000 to this 30. And something like that just gets everybody like, oh, well, then we can do this then. No, it's no problem. Our faith motivations come from, it has to come from scripture and from study. I mean, we are not connected to the land like, a little Mennonite church out in the country, which we have a lot of here in Lancaster, and which would be, I think, talking a lot to their farmers about runoff and about fertilizing and all the stuff that are the country problems contributing to the bay. Here in Lancaster, we have a very particular connection to it, which involves our sewer water. And when you explain that every rainstorm is like we're just all coming into church and, excuse my language, pooping at the same time and flushing it down our toilet instead of using our home septic tanks, that's not a great image to feel good about. So, being able to prevent that sort of thing from happening, people can get that, even though it's not something they immediately understand or have been told about. So it was a process of educating, just saying, here's what the problem is. It's easy enough to fix. You just got to take the water out of the mix and the rainwater out of it. And we'll be contributing a lot less as a community, as a church community, to this problem in the bay.
That's great. I think what you've done is, perhaps folks already aware what we call watershed literacy of where does the rain go, and if we don't actually capture the stormwater, it's spreading those pollutants downstream. And we like to pour Wendell-Berry's phrase of do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do unto you. So let's show the video now. Thanks so much, Pastor Steve. And if you can hang around for questions afterwards, that'd be great. If not, we can field them to you another way. So thanks again.
I'll be here.
Okay, great.
Look forward to seeing the other projects too.
Good, yes. So thanks, Sarah. Let's see the video.
I'm Pastor Steve Burkow here at Grace Lutheran Church in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's great to be able to talk a little bit about our project. I'm sitting here in our memorial garden, which is being fed partially by one of our downspouts. 3 years ago, we started to undertake a major renovation here at Grace Church, and when we realized how much ground we were digging up, it was an incentive for us to think about how can we capture all the rainwater. About 120,000 gallons a year now, about 2,500 gallons in a 1-inch rainfall, into a large rock basin, which is underground, letting that water go back down into the aquifer and replenish the water table. So through this project, we became aware of the work of IPC, Integrated Partners for Chesapeake, and it was a real joy to find people who were sharing the values we were trying to live into, really loving our neighbor who lives downstream, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to take pollution out of the Conestoga River, going down the Susquehanna River, down to the bay. So one of the great things was getting the green team training. That gave us a little impetus to get some more people involved. And one of our rewards was a $500 grant, which allows us to, actually we're undertaking, paying for a new study with a landscape architect to help us think about what the next phase of stormwater mitigation might look like. I encourage anybody to try to reframe your own thoughts about how you're interacting with your own use of water. And standing here behind our beautiful wildflower meadow, it didn't cost very much to put in. It's so beautiful. It provides pollinating opportunities for our little bees on the roof and other birds that come in and share this space with us. And I just want to say, if we can do it, city church, landlocked and shut in here in the urban environment, so can a lot of you. So I hope you'll consider partnering with IPC.
Great. So thank you. What a great example to inspire others to go forth and do likewise. And if folks have questions for Pastor Steve, please save them till the end. And we're going to transition to our next speaker, which is Green Team leader Diane Ray from Christ Our Anchor Catholic Church in Annapolis. And so take it away, Diane. Next slide.
Yes, hi, everyone. We are a Presbyterian church, actually.
Oh my goodness.
So
apologies. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
No, so we'll just correct that. But we're a small but mighty church on the Broadneck Peninsula outside of Annapolis. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary as a church this year. And here in April of 2022, we're celebrating our 1-year anniversary of our green team. You can see the photos there show when we launched our green team last April, on what we were calling Green Sunday, the Sunday after Earth Day. And it was right in the middle of COVID, as we all know. So we had a drive-by pledge signing of the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake Church Pledge. So we just had our second Green Sunday on April 24th, and we have that pledge now all framed as one of our artifacts of our church. And it was there as everyone walked in the door. So as I said, we're a small and mighty church with a lot of energy for green action. And just to share some different thoughts and some lessons that we've learned, et cetera, and to respond to some of the questions that Kolya asked for me to cover, I just want to say that I would say that the faith teachings that are the underpinnings of what we're trying to achieve would first off be the creation story, of course, which we're all so familiar with, but it was just reiterated to us and underscored by our special guest speaker for our Green Sunday, April 24th, who was Rabbi Nina Beth Carden. She is an author and environmental activist, and the driving force behind the push to add an environmental human rights amendment to the Maryland Constitution. So she was in our pulpit, and we just so enjoyed having her. And she told the creation story from the Old Testament, which is shared by both the Jewish and the Christian faiths. And as we all recall, God made everything in the world, the earth, the plants, the animals, and he saw that it was good. But as Rabbi Carden said, it's just not so good today. We can no longer take this world for granted. There are limits to the demands that we can place on the world. So we're using that as kind of a driver behind our green team. I liked what she said to wrap up. She said, we need to move from an ecosystem to a focus on the ecosystem. So we're trying to do that with our green action. The other faith teaching that really inspires me that I just want to share with you is that Luke chapter 6, verse 38. This is the New International Version. It was a favorite passage for my late father, and it is, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And that really speaks to me because our green team at Christ Our Anchor, we really feel strongly that if we do a good job caring for our 3-acre property here on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay, that we will inspire our greater congregation and our neighbors in Broadneck to take better care of their own little patch of earth. So one of the other things I wanted to share with you is I was asked to talk a bit about how we implemented our green team within the larger church, and some of the things that we learned, some of the cautionary tales. So we came about because one of our mission elders, Keith Maynard, he was inspired to focus on creation care at about the same time that I was studying with the Watershed Stewards Academy in Annapolis. I'm wearing my WSA t-shirt right here. Maybe you can see it. And I was embarking on WSA's year-long training program. So Keith and I kind of joined forces. We brought both of those elements together to launch our green team in April of last year. And now we've grown to be about 12 members strong. We've had mostly successes, I'm happy to say, in the action that we've taken on in the last year, but a few cautionary tales. If I can make a few suggestions about what we've learned along the way, I think one of the biggest things was we decided that we wanted to involve our larger congregation and standing committees throughout the church to gain a greater input into our green team action and better acceptance of some of the things that we were going to introduce, and also to avoid stepping on toes. So we've involved our God's Gardeners group who care for our planted areas. We sat down in the fall with people throughout our church who represent all of our functional areas of the church to have what we called an environmental charrette, environmental stewardship charrette, which is kind of a fancy name for a brainstorming session all on environmental action. And we're using that as kind of our marching orders going forward. So involvement is key, keeping it fun. That's another very big driver for us. We try to keep our green action fun. For example, one example is under our green team is an organization called, or a group of go-getters called our Wine and Divine team. And they meet very regularly. There they are, pulling out those terrible invasive vines from our 3-acre property, which is mostly wooded. And we work hard for an hour. We fill up all of those bins that you see there. And then we gather around in our camp chairs in the parking lot for maybe 30 minutes of having a little wine, a little cheese and crackers, and a little social time. And that has been just really a delight. That has been going on now since the fall. So that's really an important and energized program that we're doing. The third thing I'd like to point out is we've done a lot of action, and I'll run through the specifics of what we've actually done in the last year, but we really want to try to avoid burnout. So we're not going to meet in the month of May and have an extra meeting for our green team. We're going to fold into 2 meeting dates for Wine and Divine. We take the summer off. One of the things that we're trying to do is focus on, we all know that the adage, reduce, reuse, recycle, and to that we're adding rejoice, as just getting together in nature is so important, and relaxing. So we're trying not to burn out our good green team, and to keep things moving, but keep things fun. Third thing that I wanted to point out is the green, our connections outside of the church have been very important to us. IPC has been a great partner to us when we were launching as a sounding board. Taylor Swanson has been right there on the other end of the email or phone to give us very good guidance along the way. Our WSA is another partner, Watershed Stewards Academy. And now we've also really made some connections with other green teams in local churches through IPC. And we really value those partnerships and that access, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's see. I also wanted to, yes, we all took, not all of us, but several of us on the green team took the Faithful Green Leaders training back in, I think we graduated in February of last year. So that was a really important way to kick off our green team. We also share IPC news regularly among our green team and congregation, and tune into these webinars just like this and then discuss them at our green team meetings, so that we don't feel we'd be nearly as successful with our green team if we didn't have these vital links. So the last thing I just want to do is just to run down very quickly some of the things that we've done in the last year, and then I'll sit back and wait for later when you have questions. But I mentioned that we launched on April 18th, 2021. We had about 60 people sign our IPC partner congregation pledge. We gave out, I meant to have it with me, reusable shopping bags that we distributed to our congregation, and we launched this idea of reducing your plastic use. We also made a video, much as the last one that we saw, but ours was kind of a motivational video about launching our green team and getting everyone enthused about this new initiative. Then in the summer of last year, we just took a number of field trips to other congregations, such as St. Luke's Church in Annapolis, St. Andrew by the Bay, which is one of our neighbors here in Broadneck, just to get a sense of what other green teams were doing and to be inspired by others. And I think that was really helpful for us before we got going in our own projects, to just see what other green teams had accomplished. And we were just really inspired and by their actions. Then our Vacation Bible School in the summer had a part of its curriculum focused on clean water. So that was a way to get our youngest members involved. September of last year, we had that environmental stewardship charrette. As I mentioned, we had 14 people representing all aspects of our church involved in brainstorming. And then in the fall, we were trained by Anne Arundel Weed Resistance in identifying those non-native invasive species that we have in our woods, and trained in techniques for removal. So that was, we've logged at least 40 plus hours so far now with Wine and Divine. In the winter, we decided that we would keep up with and share news about environmental legislation that was in front of the Maryland General Assembly, and keep our congregation abreast of those important actions. So that was a new thing for our church. And then when we rounded the corner to this new year, one of the fun things that we did with our green team is we had a old-fashioned sewing bee. And we took, if you can see this, we took what were old kitchen curtains and we made them into to-go bags with a team of sewers that ranged in age from 16 on up. And we gave them to our congregation as a giveaway on Green Sunday for you to put in your car with your knives, forks, spoons, plates, so that you don't have to use plastic when you come to a fellowship event at our church or just are picking up carryout. We also had an environmental movie night in March. We showed the very entertaining film Bag It, Is Your Life Too Plastic? And our Fun Day School kids decorated bags, and our youth with really darling pictures of nature. And then our youth stuffed those bags with snacks for the movie night. And then on Earth Day, we had we called it a plant swap. So we switched out some of our non-native invasive plants like Nandina that were in our planted areas at our church, and replaced them with an array of native plants for wildlife: chokeberry, inkberry, viburnum, wild geranium, and some grasses. So our church was all spiffed up then with some new plantings for our Green Sunday and 1-year celebration of our Green Team launch on April 24th, 2022. This Green Sunday is now becoming something that we look forward to as a church, a time to celebrate nature, a time to have some special action in our church service with our young kids. They all sang and acted out He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Our youth were involved in the church service. We had an outdoor reception with a beautiful cake and our fun green giveaway. So I think I've talked enough. That's what we've done in our first year. And I'll sit back now and wait for our question time. Oh, I can't hear.
Collier, you are muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Diane. Those were some really exciting and creative actions and ways to engage your congregation and educate them at the same time about being good stewards for the local lands and waters. And Sarah, could you advance the slides? We could see a couple more. Here's the planting native plants there outside the church next, and the Green Sunday event. So Diane has been up to, and their team has been up to some really great examples for others to emulate. All right, so thank you. We're going to have one more example of Green Team successful actions. And this one is from Fairhaven United Methodist Church in Darnestown, Maryland. It's near Gaithersburg. And I want to mention that we nominated them for their efforts. They have just a brand new Green Team trained last October 2021. And we nominated them for their organizing efforts of an Earth Festival, which you'll hear about in a few moments, for the Gaithersburg Environmental Award. And Gaithersburg granted them that award. So we're very proud of their efforts. Next slide. And we co-sponsored this Earth Festival with them and with the efforts of Reverend Ken Hawes and ministerial intern Cherie Wharton there at Fairhaven United Methodist Church. They weren't able to be with us on this live webinar, but we did a recording of them telling their story. And so next slide.
So thank you for the invitation to do these videos and to have a few minutes with you. And so the first thing I am Reverend Ken Hawes from Fairhaven United Methodist Church in Darnestown, Maryland. And we have recently launched our Green Team here at the church in partnership with Interfaith Partners. And that's been a blessing to us. But the first thing I want to talk about for a minute is thinking about the faith traditions which guide and inspire the work that we do. And our understanding of creation care is deeply rooted in the scriptures and in the teachings of our own denomination, the United Methodist Church. So let me start with scripture. There are several poignant teachings from the first couple of chapters in Genesis about creation. First is that God is the creator, the one who created us all out of an abundance of love. God calls all of the creation good. In fact, God calls the creation very good. All of creation is interrelated. God cares for the creatures of the earth, abundantly providing for all of us and seeking to be in relationship with that creation. And one of the ways that God cares for creation is to appoint caretakers of this marvelous garden that we call the earth. Humanity is given dominion, not to exploit the earth, but rather that we might be its stewards. I could go on, but I'm going to stop there. That gives a good background. Then in the United Methodist Church, we have a set of social principles which outline the theology by which we do justice and mercy ministries, and as we practice to love God and love our neighbor. So the principle on the natural world begins this way. All creation is the Lord's, and we are responsible for the ways in which we use and abuse it. Water, air, soil, minerals, energy resources, plants, animal life, and space are to be valued and conserved because they are God's creation, and not solely because they are useful to human beings. God has granted us stewardship of creation. That principle goes on to explain how we are to care for the world. And then based on that principle, no fewer than 10 specific resolutions were outlined in our book of resolutions about action and advocacy for the creation. So it is the scriptures and the teachings of our denomination that guide and inspire our work as creation stewards.
Thank you so much. Wonderful explanation. Now, Cherie, would you like to share some of the actions you've taken? Sherry Wharton is intern at Fairhaven. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Kolya, and thank you for the opportunity. What is exciting for us is that we were able to establish a green team this year at Fairhaven. And the IPC played a very important role in helping us to get organized, to get trained, and effectively inspiring us with ideas on different projects that we might partake during the year. We are very fortunate to have some committed members in the congregation who wanted to start the Green Team with a set of goals that effectively would drive their activity for the year. We had an educational goal of wanting to continuously be educating our congregation on energy conservation and other environmental tips that they and techniques that they could use effectively at home and at church. And then we also wanted to be involved in conservation efforts in the excuse me, in the community. And so we actively thought about ways in which we can participate in events that are offered in the city of Gaithersburg or in our surrounding community. And we wanted to also have a program that was intergenerational. So this year's activity, our Earth Day Festival, effectively was designed to include all of the generations. And so we had a children's ministry and we partnered with our Sunday school, and they effectively were able to do a children's garden. And so that contributed to some of the activities that were held that day. We wanted to educate the public and invite them in to get to know Fairhaven. And so we made sure that there were educational materials available. We had master gardeners available to talk about both native and invasive plants. And we were also giving away free plants to individuals who were either just starting a garden or were professionals and had been gardening for a while. And so our last goal was to engage our congregation in an activity to support the environment and have fun with it. And I think on all four fronts, we were very successful in reaching our goals.
Well, congratulations on your success. I'm going to now turn it back over to Pastor Ken to talk about how these actions really have been involving the wider community or impacted your relationship with the wider community.
Okay. So our work with Interfaith Partners under Minister Cherie's guidance has really energized our Green Team, as you just heard. This Earth Day Festival that we had just this past week is one of the first community activities that we've been able to plan and implement as we begin to break out of this COVID pandemic. So it was really exciting to just have people both in the congregation and people from the community here on our property. And I hope that you've seen some pictures of our property, because it really is a beautiful piece of land. And I think we've got 7 acres of land here. But anyway, it was exciting for us to get together and to celebrate this beautiful creation that God has provided for us. Additionally, we have been recognized by the city of Gaithersburg for our efforts. We are a recipient of one of the 2022 environmental awards of the city. We have been able to connect up with some of the creation care and earthkeeper ministers in our conference. And it really remains to be seen how our neighbors are going to be impacted by our environmental work here. But we do plan to keep on working at it. And I look forward to continuing to figure out and find out how we're going to do that and continuing the journey together. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate the time we've had to share our story.
Many blessings on your continued care of creation as an example to the wider community. Thank you.
So thank you for.
Could everyone mute themselves, please? A few slides that illustrate our Earth Day festival. Here's members of the green team out with their plants to give away and demonstrate native plants and pollinator plants. They had a beautiful day there. We had IPC was represented with an information table, and we also posted their event on our website so that others could register and know about the event, and we helped them publicize it widely so that they could spread the word. Next slide, please. And here you see the plant giveaway and the area where they developed the children's garden, which are raised beds that are in these planter boxes, and engage the kids in actually planting them. So it was really an intergenerational activity, as intern minister Cherie Wharton said. It was a really great example. All right. Well, now it's time to open it up for questions and answers from our speakers. And if you all, I know there was some back and forth in the chat about bees, and we just open it up if everyone would like to share. Just open your mic and then say your question. I'll also be looking at the chat to make sure we don't miss anybody. And if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Deb Dorfer, yes, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, inspiration?
I have a comment. I realize it's honeybees.
Is this Susan? Hello? Looks like she got cut off. I'm sorry. Well, maybe she'll come back.
Because I'm here. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
there you are. Okay, could you repeat your question, please?
Oh, sure. Okay. It was more a comment than a question, but I noticed that the first presenter talked about the bees, the honeybees, but solitary bees are very important. And since the native plants and flowers need the solitary bees for pollination, that perhaps part of their bee interest could be building little bee houses. They're just like little bird houses, but they have a front and back are open and with tubes of different diameters so that solitary bees can lay their eggs in there and then they hatch. But they're really important for pollination. And it's kind of a trend, you know, that people are building these bee houses. So it might be an idea for them.
That's those, and they're actually quite pretty.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And the
Yeah,
fact
well,
that
there's many native bees, and many people aren't aware of the wide variety of native bees there are, not just the traditional honeybee.
bees, and they're solitary, so they're not
Mhm.
aggressive because there's no hive that they're trying to protect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you very much, Susan, for that contribution.
Yep.
Anyone else? Yes, Pastor Steve, go ahead.
Well, just a follow up. Do you have an easy link to share about solitary bees that I could share with our beekeeper? I could just give her the topic, but we could look it up
I
ourselves.
don't, and I think you'll just have to go on the web. I'm sorry, I don't have a
Okay, that's
specific
okay.
one in mind,
Yeah.
but yeah, the bee houses and solitary bees, you'll find it. Yep.
Yeah, there's some instructions about how to build one, and
Yes.
I've seen them available.
Right.
I don't know if Taylor
Yes,
has
sir.
anything to add.
I was going to jump in. There are so many wonderful plans online, Pastor Steve. It is amazing. If you search mason bees or solitary bees, either of them, just bee house in general, if it doesn't look like the classic honeybee hive, you'll recognize it immediately. It is just
Right.
tubes and different drilled items that are just cavities that kind of resemble woodpecker holes and
Yeah.
old reeds
Awesome.
and stuff like that.
Totally
Yeah.
new information to me. So that's
Mhm.
great.
They take to them fast. It's very fun.
I would like to add something to that, to Pastor Steve. You may find that that would be a good project for somebody in your congregation who's trying to do a Boy Scout or Girl Scout project.
Or even a
We have-
confirmation project. We
Yeah.
do confirmation projects.
There you go. Yeah, we've had some young people who've approached us for ideas of a bluebird house, et cetera. And, that would be really kind of a natural project for that, to make that bee house.
One quick suggestion is that you might put some, chicken wire or other kind of wire in the front and back so that other animals don't get in there. Just something you can roll up, and every once in a while you have to replace the tubes, but, just to protect it in general. Yep.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
Any other ideas out there or questions? Well, I have a question, Steve, and I'm sure that internally IPC knows this already, but maybe other folks might be curious about. You did name a donor within your congregation, but other sources of funding, and where'd you go to get all that money?
It's all, it's really all, it's part of our stewardship over the last few years, in terms of faith connections. It's because, the city is not a kind of a quote unquote natural environment. You really have to be more creative at helping the members get involved in that. And part of the way we've done that is we do publish a weekly newsletter in print and online. We've done it for 100 years, the Grace News. And one of the regular features in there is a green tip. We're trying to help people, use their Christian values that we're learning about here in their own homes. And so it focuses a lot on things that people can do when they're not at church. Lifestyle changes, styrofoam, you talked about plastic packaging or plastic-free packaging, and all of those kinds of things. But so to just bringing all of that prep work into focus through a big project like the water, it really pays off. And people were ready to give. We didn't have any, we initially got into the IPC contact because somebody told us here in Lancaster, you ought to call them. They have grant money. And, it was all too little, too late. We were already underway. So this was all paid for, at least so far, by our own people seeking to make an impact in environmental stewardship that they've been studying about and learning about, in slower, subtle ways through sermons and Bible studies, and through the pandemic, doing Zoom book readings. We have a book group that reads a lot of books about creation care, and so it's kind of neat to see it all coming together. But it's, in answer to your question, there's no outside money, at least not yet. We were thankful for the $500 grant for doing the Green Team training, and we tried to pay that forward into our next study because we found we couldn't really apply for a substantial grant without doing the engineering work, the professional design work that those kind of grant applications require.
Right, yeah. And while IPC doesn't give grants ourselves, what we do is point people to grants available through Chesapeake Bay Trust, or there are sometimes local, regional, and county grant sources. So that's where we act as a kind of connector.
That's a good clarification. I just meant that, when the IPC letters first popped up into my field of vision, somebody was saying, go ask them, they know where the money is. So
Great, yes. Yeah, and many of these grants have funding cycles where they only come up once a year, and you have to get the grant proposals in on time, and we're here to assist folks to do that. From small to large, there's many grants for as little to as small as $5,000 can really help you build out a pollinator garden and get those plants in the ground, and to larger projects like with cisterns and rain gardens, which are more of an engineering project than a pollinator garden. So, and I'm sure Diane could add more with all of her watershed steward knowledge about that. Yes, Pastor
If I
Steve.
could, and this is the last thing I really have to say. When we were talking about motivations for doing this, the Methodist pastor and others were referring to, some of our basic foundational texts about stewardship of the earth and so on. I think it was important to note for us too, and this may be helpful to others to hear, that one of the things that kind of motivated the congregation in their vote, I think, was when some of the younger people spoke up and made it clear how important this was to them as a kind of generation. And not just like, hey, we're the few young people, we're in this meeting and we want you to listen to us. But they said, if you want other people to come around here, this is what all my friends are talking about. This is what they talk about at work. Like their work is going green. They have a green roof on their business, or they have, programs. And we're all very concerned about this. And it's like the church just plods along and says, oh, we're just here to save souls and we're going to talk about sin and repentance. But this is a great connection for that. This is a great connection with this generation who has a heightened sense of awareness about the precarious state of the climate and of the impact of human activity. And so in a way, it's a kind of evangelism. It's an evangelism profile, I guess you could say. We want to put it very forward on our website that we have, for a city congregation, take our environmental stewardship seriously, and we put our money, our own money, where our values are with that. And that has been, that has drawn people to the congregation. I'll just say that.
That's a great example. And we've been hearing this more and more often from some of the green teams, that they've had new young families join because their congregation is active environmentally. That's what many people are looking for. So that's great. Anyone else with a question?
I think I would just add to that, to piggyback on that, for everybody who's listening, who's thinking about launching a green team or is new in getting their green team established. We really thought from the beginning it was very important for us to have one of our active youth on our green team. And she's going to be going away to college, so we're going to have to replace her because she's been a very instrumental voice on our green team and speaks for us to the larger congregation. And I think that's been just a really powerful message.
Thank you, Diane. All right. Well, we're coming up against just about 4 more minutes here, but I'm going to post that link to the evaluation again. If you haven't opened it up, please do open it so that it'll be sitting there even after you leave this meeting. And if you would like to stay for the regional gathering, please do after we stop the recording on this meeting. And any other questions, comments, ideas, something you're doing that might be different than what others are doing?
I would ask, is St. Martin's Lutheran Church in Annapolis involved with IPC yet?
Yes, they are, and they are doing an amazing job. I think they have 13 or 14 rain gardens on the property now.
Oh, that's great. That's my home congregation.
Sensational. Hey, is it? Fantastic. I live just down the road from them.
Oh, cool. So nice to hear you, Diane, out there on a little farther north, and some other folks from my old hometown.
Someone asked the question, are there funds available for solar installations at churches? Yes, and with many of those kinds of projects, we partner with Interfaith Power and Light, which is an organization, also a faith-based organization like ours, focused on environmental work. But primarily theirs is in energy conservation and climate justice. But we do many kinds of collaborative efforts, particularly during the advocacy time of the legislative session here in Maryland. I'm posting that in here. And if you're interested, please let us know and we'll connect you up with them.
Just a comment on that. We've looked at that, and just make sure when you're talking to providers, you have to be sort of persistent because a lot of providers, their financial model only works with like a tax rebate or a tax credit financing option. And churches, can't take advantage of that because we don't pay taxes in the first place. So the installers oftentimes shrug their shoulders and say, well, I can't really do this for you. That's not exactly true. It just doesn't fit the way they typically cookie cutter their financing of those projects. So you have to dig a little deeper. We're in the process of learning more about that, and I can't answer any further than that. But
Yeah.
I can say that just don't get discouraged because a lot of times the first answer is, it's not going to pay off, or it's not going to
Right.
work out.
Well, and there's some other innovative efforts like community solar. It's kind of a cooperative effort. I wouldn't have the time right now to explain it, but it's another way that people can participate in clean green energy sources. So there's lots of possibilities out there.
And you can always tell your electrical company that you want to buy green energy, but it's more expensive.
Yeah, it depends on the sources. There are some suppliers that will be actually giving lower rates than whatever your regular distributor. So there's a distributor and then there's a supplier, but there are green energy sources like wind and solar together that can be had. I know personally we've been doing that for the last 7 years, getting 100% wind energy as our supply. So let's move on to the next slide and make sure everybody's gotten that time to do this closing prayer together before we close it out. And anyone who wants to stay around and chat for the regional gathering with Taylor as our host, please do. So please join me in this prayer, but please to stay muted while I'll read out loud. May our actions to heal the lands and waters of the Chesapeake watershed be an inspiration to others. May our efforts be magnified to build a movement of restoration and galvanize people of faith to be caretakers of the gifts of creation. And may we give back to earth in reciprocity so that the work of our heads, hearts, and hands is a blessing of justice and regeneration of earth. Amen, and so be it. Next slide. If you haven't already, please do open up that link for the evaluation. And last slide, please. Again, this is a program as part of the Faithful Green Leader Training Program. If you haven't attended our Faithful Green Leader Training, the next one will be in the fall of 2022, October, but our calendar is there on our website and you can register anytime. And all of these learning labs are recorded, so you can look back at any ones that we've already held, and this one too will be sent to all people who registered for this webinar, this learning lab. Thank you one and all, and we can stop the recording.
Thank you.